Hello all and welcome. This is Colette from Witchways, and today I want to share some of the answers to questions that I got on Patreon and here on YouTube. I got some great ones this time, and I want to share that I'm going to be answering this from my personal viewpoint, not anyone else's, my personal gnosis, what I've learned and been taught, and from my 50 years in the craft. My caveat, of course, is that other people might have very different answers, and if you do, I encourage you to put those in the comments. I also wanted to let you know that I'm probably going to be taking next week off of making videos just because I want to get my house in shape before fall and Samhain season set in. I time-stamped this by questions, so I hope you enjoy. All right, question one, let's go. When is it ever appropriate to channel darker energies into your workings in your opinion? I think that really depends on a couple of factors. The first one is, what do you mean by darker energies? And secondly, how skilled you are and how much effort do you want to put into this? Each person needs to make that choice for themselves. Witchcraft is a really broad umbrella, and what you decide is perfect. As a witch, part of my practice is calling on underworld magic. Some people would consider that darker. To me, it's a healthy balance of witchcraft. I work with the magic of the deep below, and the celestial realm is included in what I do. But I imagine that question is about things that maybe border on things like baneful workings, working with the dead, or perhaps cursing. To me, there's a couple questions to ask yourself. Do I need to defend myself in this situation? Would a curse or some energy from the dead or the underworld fan the flames? Or would some stronger clearing with some protection put up afterwards work better and more efficiently? Baneful magic takes a lot of time and energy, and you have to clear your space and the tools that you use very thoroughly so that none of that energy sticks to you or your later workings. Most people don't want to do that kind of cleanup, so that can really make things worse if you don't. The next question is on right relationship with the Fae and how to keep them happy. And if things are disappearing from your apartment, is it perhaps the Fae? So I did a video on this a few weeks ago, so this answer is going to be pretty succinct. A lot of people are very reluctant to work with the Fae, but the traditional approach is to give them offerings, preferably, if you can, in my opinion, outside on the back porch. They like cream, milk, sweetened with butter or honey, and a heavily buttered and sweetened porridge. My belief is that they also really like fruits, chocolate, and sweet cordials made from flowers like roses. Be careful of putting chocolate outside because it can be really toxic to animals. After you've been giving them offerings for a while, you can say something like, if you happen to know where this particular object is, I would appreciate being able to find it again. That way you're not making potentially false accusations and don't risk offending anyone. What you do with food offerings varies from culture to culture and tradition to tradition. I was taught that it's good to compost it, and I have city compost and they pick it up once a week. I also was taught that what spirits and ancestors eat is not any part of the food itself, so that's not precious. It's actually that they take the vital force, the smells, the essence of the food, and so it's completely fine to throw out in some fashion the food that is left over. The next couple questions are about circle casting, and the first one is it really necessary to do circle casting, and what might you do instead? People do all kinds of different things depending on their culture and tradition. And I want to start by saying I have a video on circle casting that I'll try to remember to link in the description. And in my culture, people and my ancestors in Europe have been casting circles since probably about the medieval times, maybe a little earlier, but I doubt that they did that a lot earlier or in pre-Christian times. let me know in the comments if you have a reliable source that suggests something different. In short, if I'm doing any kind of magic that creates actual change, working with spirits, or doing a major divination, I'm going to cast a circle. For these types of actions, the circle creates a container to keep out unwanted influences that might act upon your magic and shift it. I might also create a circle when I'm trying to raise some energy to charge something, and in those cases, the circle acts as a container to help the energy build. I don't cast a circle when I'm just making offerings, doing a daily practice, or pulling a card of the day. I do have another practice that I sometimes do when I'm out in public or with people I don't know well, and it's called a soft circle or a filter of shared intention. And I usually only do that with groups. What that looks like is focusing on the center where we set up an altar together or visualize one if we're in public. We take a few breaths together and visualize our magical intention or purpose flowing into the center of the circle where the altar is, and it radiating back out to us like the spokes of a wheel or the strands of a web. It's not as secure, but I think it does have a place, particularly with less formal situations or places where you might have to move suddenly, like during some activism work. The next circle question is, how do you close the circle once you're done? Do you reverse the steps? So confusingly enough, people often refer to this as opening the circle, sort of like opening a shut door. And there's different ways that people do it. The way that I do it is to reverse the steps, moving in a counterclockwise direction. Other traditions believe you should never go counterclockwise in a ritual. And I like to afterwards put my hands on the ground to release any excess energy, and it's a way of letting the magic spread out into physical reality. So the next question, I'm going to read this one. Where would you look, or how would you look for a reputable witch to clear heavier energy from a house, like a haunting or something more severe? And do you have any recommendations on where to eventually learn to do that for yourself? This is a hard one because I actually think the best suggestion is finding someone reputable through word of mouth from trusted friends and fellow witches, which can be really hard if you don't know any. You can also study with someone reputable for a few years, or start by reading some books, building your skills upward over time, especially with other people who can help you out. I do have a video about moving into a new house that might have some suggestions for you. In particular, I talk about a triple clearing and then immediately putting up new protection, which might be helpful if the spirit is not very deeply entrenched. I also find that sound is really helpful. Banging on pots, ringing bells has been used for hundreds of years to disperse hauntings or malicious spirits. Best of luck to you, and let us know if you find any good sources. Okay, next question. I'm going to read this one as well. I'd love to have some ideas for discreet protection spells that I could do near the property line for a creepy next door neighbor. He always watches us, tries to listen to our conversations. He has a camera with audio pointed toward our side yard, and he has a drone. I feel like I have no privacy whatsoever when I go outside. This is also a difficult one, especially if you're living in a rental, because I find that most protection magic works really best if there's some kind of physical screen that you can attach your magic to. There are a few options though. You could try putting up some bamboo poles, maybe put them in pots of dirt and hang some lattice on it, or some cloth, and then of course you're going to magically charge those things with protection. That should be okay even in a rental situation. Whatever you put up, you're going to charge it. Some ideas for charging it would be to sprinkle some obsidian water on it, which you make just by putting obsidian in some water and soaking it for a while. You could also try making an herbal tea and spraying that on whatever you're going to put up. You could try putting some sigils either with water on whatever you put up, or if you can make them look decorative enough, that should probably also work. I also think it's possible to put some rocks that You charge with the energy of deflection and mirroring back along the property line, or even bury them if you need to. You can also paint sigils or symbols on those, or the words protection if they're not going to be visible. You could also try putting up a line of magical protection just with your intention and your energy. Basically, you just walk that section of the yard holding your intention in mind and imagining your intention flowing into the earth as you walk that section. And you can do that in a very casual way, and that's fine. Some people might find that difficult to do, but you can practice inside until you feel like you have it. And then at the end, visualize a pentacle with a circle around it to seal it, and definitely put up protective charms inside and outside of your house where he can't see them. Do you have any recommendations for a good health spell for someone? Yes, I do. There are a lot of different versions that I use, but let's start with something simple. I would start by getting some St. John's wort oil or some tincture. You can find it online or maybe locally at a health food store, and anoint the four corners of a piece of paper with that tincture or oil. Write an intention down that makes sense to you given the situation, and it could be something like abundant and steady good health for this body in this life. Then take either a red candle, which represents the vital life force of human blood, or a green candle, which represents the life force and vitality of the green world. Any size candle is fine. Place it in the center on top of your intention that you've written down on that piece of paper. Light the candle, speak your intention 5 times, draw a pentacle with a circle around it in the air over your candle and piece of paper, and say something like, "It is done," and let the candle burn all the way out. The kitten's back in the room. Is it a good idea to give an offering to the new land one moves to of what was foraged there by tribes if it is Native American land? And basically, in my opinion, all of Mesoamerica, north and south, is Native American land. Or should it be simple, like clean water, so as to not offend? Good question, and it will depend on who you ask. If you've been taught by a Native American person a specific practice and you're not selling it or teaching it, go ahead and use that practice. I think the Indigenous community is very diverse and has a multiplicity of opinions on this matter, and their opinion is what matters most. I've heard some people say that you need to give the land what it is used to getting. However, I've heard more people say that there are specific songs, ways that this needs to be done in order to respect the culture and respect the land. Personally, I stick to water, or sometimes I use herbs around the city that my ancestors would have used. Sometimes I use breath. I also heard one suggestion in a training that said basically anytime you move to new land, you can ask the question, how is it possible for me to be in right relationship with this land and its original stewards and caretakers and inhabitants? And then of course, when you do that, follow up with some kind of physical support. And again, I want to be clear that I have an opinion, but what I believe about this topic is not the most important thing. Okay, the next question is, what do you do if you know grand elder trees are going to be cut down of yours and other old loved flora, but there's nothing you can do to stop it? They've been there for generations being taken care of, and how does one say goodbye to the accompanying fauna as well? So first I want to say I'm really sorry that's happening, and I know that's really rough and hard. First of all, I would say let all the plants there know what's happening. Talk to them. Tell them how much you have appreciated them being there. Touch them, be with them, and make an offering of water before they're cut and after they're cut down. And whatever grows in the new area, whether it's weeds or trees, thank it, nurture it, and appreciate it for being there as new life. The next question is about clearing. Why do we generally not have to cleanse things that do cleansing? And so, as the person further elaborated, I do think it depends on what type of thing it is. For example, herbs that you've harvested don't need to be cleared or cleansed. They carry their own protection in with them. And I think that's even true of store-bought herbs to some degree. When you're talking about incense, I think that it gets made for a lot of different purposes, but if you're using it for cleansing, what you're using is the smoke, which didn't exist before you lit the incense. And so I think that's fine. Smoke has been used for purification in and of itself in lots of cultures. I will really often dispose of the container that these cleansing objects came in and get rid of it and put the items in a new jar or a container that is clear. I do clear my candles, even if I'm just using the flame for clearing or just using them to represent fire on the altar. I would appreciate hearing what other people's experiences are on this topic. What are small ways to acknowledge and practice the elements? I just did a video about elemental magic a few weeks ago, and I'll try and remember to link it in the description. One of the practices that I did for many years was to go out sometime early in the day, face each of the quarters, and to greet them by saying something like, "Air, I appreciate you," and just giving it a breath, and then turning and saying something like, "Fire, I appreciate you for the heat I feel in my body," and then just going around the circle, thanking each element or quarter for what it is that they provide in your life, just with one sentence. Don't get elaborate or you will never do it. You can also offer water in each of the quarters. Some people might feel like water offering for fire is not appropriate. That can make sense. I totally see that. You could also make some kind of herbal offering blend. Look up some herbs that are associated with each element and have 4 jars of different incense blends or different offering blends and place them each day in each of the quarters. Some people also create simple songs or just make sound that reminds them of the element and offer some appreciation as they do that. What is the difference between altars that are normally up against a wall compared to an altar in a circle where you called the watchtowers and lit the directional candles? So this is another one. I'd love to hear people that come from different styles than mine chime in on this. My feeling is, if I'm getting your question right, is that it's just a difference between different styles of magic. When you're calling in the watchtowers and light directional candles to honor them, it's probably a slightly more formal style of magic. And those styles have their own sort of rules and traditions and meanings behind why they do what they do, which I'm not super well versed on, some of the more ceremonial types of magic. And sometimes even in those styles of magic, when I've been in them, the altar goes up in the north or against the wall, and it goes in the north to represent the earth as our actual living, breathing altar that we live upon every day. I work in a lot less formal styles generally, so I almost always put my altar in the center. And personally, I only place an altar off to the side if I'm doing a big ritual where there's a lot of movement, like at Samhain, or where we have multiple altars to honor different kinds of beings around the edges. And I love the next question. I think something that is left out of cleansing rituals is the filling the energy void after a cleansing. What is your favorite post-cleansing ritual to fill that void? Okay, so I think I might be unusual in this because I hear a lot of people talk about it. Personally, I don't experience a void after I've done any kind of cleansing most of the time. I feel like when I'm doing a cleansing, I'm clearing out stagnant or unwanted energies or things that don't belong there in the first place. And so what's left in my body or in the house is just the energy that naturally belongs there, and it will reassert itself. However, it's different in every situation. So I would say if you feel and experience a void there, then there is one. So what I would do is burn some kind of devotional incense, or maybe put a pot of herbs to steam on the stove that contains something gentle and soothing like lavender or chamomile, or something kind of sweet like cinnamon, to invoke a little bit more positive spirit energy back into the space. If it's cleansing yourself, what I would do is take several cleansing breaths and focus on the vital force of the earth and sky flowing back into you, or to take a bath with some herbs that are supportive and calming, or make a spray, something like rose water, to just spray on yourself to fill that energy back up with something lovely. The next two questions are actually part of bigger questions and bigger topics, so I'm going to keep the answers really short and maybe make a video in the next few weeks on this topic. So the first question is, what makes witchcraft witchcraft? Like, what is the requirements, in quotes, love that, to call an action a part of witchcraft? Would you consider meditation itself, or simply talking to plants or animals, small daily things, as witchcraft? That depends on who you talk to. I think things like meditation are part of Asian culture for specific purposes and aren't necessarily part of the witchcraft tradition. They're obviously very useful tools if you're working within that tradition or trained by somebody who has been trained in that tradition. I think there were probably centering and focusing techniques that may have been similar that our ancestors did that we don't know about, but they weren't meditation in the way it's practiced today. And yes, I do 100% think that small daily practices are a big part of witchcraft. Just developing relationships by talking to the plants and animals around you is a wonderful thing to do and great to hone your magical skills. Okay, here's the second question on this topic. In your opinion, do you feel that someone can identify as a witch without doing spell work or rituals? What truly makes someone a witch? I think you can call yourself a witch if you feel like one and you identify as one. That, to me, that's the basic criteria. I also think spells and rituals are not necessarily part of all witchcraft practices. Small daily practices, like I mentioned before, doing divination, building relationships with the land around you, just being in a place where you notice the spirituality of what's around you, or noticing the spirits of the land, can all be ways that you practice witchcraft and are definitely part of witchcraft, in my opinion. I want to thank you all. Those were great questions. Okay, let's see if we can get the kitten up for a promo. Do you want to come up and help? Just look at the camera and say hello? No? Okay.